Good morning to the Dutch Mentor Monday morning chat. And I welcome today my friend and mentor, Bob Cooper, who has been in the industry in healthcare and beyond for several decades. He can explain himself how long that really is. He has a wealth of experience around lots of operational and HR issues, but he had a special passion and wrote a book called Huddle Up a few years ago, but it still remains so important today in order to be able to establish a culture of excellence. So our conversation today with Bob is really going to be about what does it take to set up a culture of excellence and the importance of the institutional huddle and beyond. So Bob, why don't you take a couple minutes and introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll take it from there. Good morning, and thank you for being here with me.
My pleasure. Good morning, and thank you for having me, Walter. Yeah, I've been involved with healthcare for a long, long time. I actually started back in the early 1990s when I was in working for Montefiore Medical Center, both in human resources and organizational development. I then went on to be the director of organizational development at St. Joseph's Regional Medical Center, and then I went to private practice back in 2002. And so it's, again, a pleasure to be with all of you.
Thank you. It is, obviously we build up a repertoire and of experiences across the way, and it's not always easy, right? I always say that anybody who's traveled a straight road from the bottom to the top never picked up the right experiences along the way. So much has been discussed in the past about what is servant leadership and what is, servant's excellence or developing this culture of excellence. What is your definition of a culture of excellence?
Yeah, my definition of a culture of service excellence is a culture where every member of the interdisciplinary team views each other as an internal customer, whereby the thought process within the culture is how do I serve you? Which, then says, am I listening to you? Am I anticipating your need? Am I collaborating with you in a way that says what's best for the patient, what's best for our organization? So the mindset that I have worked hard to develop throughout my career is a mindset where every single employee sees their value and sees their value in terms of how they serve each other as internal customers.
Yeah, excellent. I cannot agree with you more. And I think that really has morphed itself into this new, I'm not sure how new it is, but this servant leadership style, right? It's less about me, it's more about them, right? It's outward thinking rather than inward thinking. And knowing and understanding that we are each other's customers really helps us to have a deeper understanding. Of course, we need to learn to listen before we can comprehend, right? And listening with to can have a deep understanding of the person that you're working with, and of course, you go at it as one team. So. I started in healthcare back in 2003 inside the hospital, pre-hospital. Of course, I've been busy with that, and since the late 80s. There was no such thing as a huddle, but then it kind of became popular 2005, 2006. Tell me a little bit about your journey, about the importance of the huddle or how you went about that, because I believe you're like the grandfather of the institutional huddle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so actually, it started the director of organizational development, St. Joseph's Regional Medical Center, back in the late 90s. So it was right around 98, 99, when in working in collaboration officer, a lady named Barbara O'Brien, she was talking to me about a concern that many of her nurse managers had. And the concern was this, that they understood that all the other departments were working hard to service their needs as customers, which ultimately an enhancement in the patient experience. But although they were all well intentioned, there really wasn't a way to best get them all on the playing field together, focusing in a very systematic way to support each other. So when I went, I developed the organizational huddle, had that trademarked. I shortly thereafter wrote the book Huddle Up, and also in early 2000, about 2001, the advisory board company came in, evaluated the organizational huddle as a grade A best practice. This was written up in their Nursing Executive Center document. Now, this was creating a framework where both nursing and other key support departments, like central supply, like housekeeping, like a laboratory, like admitting, or a lot of different departments, went through a whole comprehensive training program where they learned how to see each other as customers, but not only that, how to learn to collaborate in a way that focused on problems in the moment, learning how to negotiate problem solving. So I'll give you a very specific example. Imagine if nursing says, on a med surg unit, they say, we need to increase a certain stock item from 25 to 50, as an example. Now, in the organizational huddle model, under the guidance of a trained champion, the representatives of central supply learns to listen clearly to that nursing representative, hear the need, and then respond to the need. We then use a tracking document. And the Joint Commission at St. Joseph, very interesting, at St. Joseph's in the early 2000s, so one of my colleagues said, Bob, you're learning. We were at a meeting with Joint Commission, and they said, every time they asked about, what do you have to deal with a performance improvement methodology to solve operational issues, they kept bringing up the organizational huddle. It's about accountability, and the tracking document, and doing this in a transparent, open way with the tracking document, with the trained champion, reporting up through a governing body like a patient satisfaction committee, creates within the organizational culture both a framework and a mindset of service excellence.
Yeah, excellent. I've seen this now in practice, both on a unit level and as well as the hospital level. Now, one of the things I get as a pushback, what I hear is that people now feel they have to attend these. It's a cultural expectation that you attend the institutional huddle, but they don't get value out of it. It has become a bad report rather than a problem solving, or you go to it and you hear the same thing over and over, which of course we become deaf and blind to that over time. How do you keep that institutional huddle fresh and meaningful for the attendees so you really can get and drive that operational excellence?
Thank you. And I'll tell you what I observed myself within, the institutional huddle. It's sort of like as a practitioner, and I'm sure you could appreciate this, you develop a model, and over time, it starts to get sort of watered down, and I've observed, for example, when I go, Bob, come to our huddle, right? It was a bedboard huddle. And I went to it, and they said, how do you feel? I said, well, this isn't exactly the version that I taught. And so what happens, and that's why people lose interest. In my model, the way it's supposed to be executed is based on the concept of representation and empowerment. So think about this. You started up on, say, a unit level, right? I use the example of med surg. You can pick any unit. And you have a champion. Champions normally in my model are individuals from that unit, such as a charge nurse, right? They end up facilitating, keeping the tracking document. Now, you might start off at a supervisory level. So you might have representatives from nursing, central supply, laboratory, and other departments. Over time, they bring other staff with them. And the concept of my model is representation. So you don't need, I've seen it where they go, we've got our institutional huddle, we've got 80 people in a room. That's not the version that I developed. You should only really need, as it matures, is over time, you have your champions in place, you have your time picked out, your time, and by the way, and under the model I teach, you're done in 10 minutes. You're done in 10 minutes. It's focused, but picture this. Imagine you have a representative, a manager, let's say, from nursing, for example, but now you have a technician from the laboratory, and you have a housekeeper. In my model, as it matures, we mentor others on the model, and we don't care about titles. Titles in my model are irrelevant. Here's that the individual from that department who is asked to come to that given huddle understands they're there to listen, to serve of the nurses on the unit, and most of them, they are trusted and they are empowered to make decisions.
Yeah, I've seen that work, and when it works and when it clicks, it really makes a significant difference, right? Now, as human beings, we love dopamine, and dopamine is released when you create wins. So, in your institutional huddle, in the framework that you talked about today, you're really talking about the axis, right? The drivers to outcomes. So, in what I have incorporated in the team operational rhythm is not only that importance of that daily huddle that is hyper focused, but also a meaningful metric. So both you can measure, and I think that really goes to that sense of that cadence of accountability. Now, I go by a simple slogan, right? If you measure it, performance improves. Well, if you measure performance on a daily basis and you select the right meaningful metrics, performance will accelerate. So tell me a little bit about the role of metrics in your institutional huddle, and maybe you can share a success story as well.
Sure. Yeah, actually, the metrics is very, very important. And this is so the way we structure this is you have, as I mentioned, champions and more than one. Usually, I like at least two champions on a unit-based huddle, and they keep a tracking document. Now, the tracking document is not minutes. People I know,
Hmm.
minutes get sometimes a bad reputation. What they're intended to do is simply state the commitment made. So, for example, as in my example earlier, commitment was made on these par levels. We're going to go from 25 to 50, and the commitment is that's going to start this Friday by noontime. And then we make sure we make sure, well, did it happen? And in most cases, it does. Now, you then have a governing body. So my recommendation is always that the champions should now report out to a governing committee. It could be an operations committee. It could be a patient satisfaction committee, but some group that has oversight on the patient experience. And the purpose of that reporting out is a twofold. One is let's take a look at the types of issues that are being resolved. That's number one. Number two, we always talk about the leader clearing the path. So I have a client, for example, where I understood that when they did their to the patient satisfaction committee, there was an identified on multiple units a certain internal supplier department that was not following through according. And my understanding is then senior leadership on the governing committee met with that director and that got resolved. And so when we talk about developing a culture of accountability, there's a couple of factors I've learned. One is keep it transparent. So by having trained champions, tracking it and following, that keeps it transparent. By reporting it in body, it keeps it transparent. By having the governing body send a clear message to department heads that failure is not an option, really reminds people that we take service excellence and serving each other as being so critical. And by the way, other outcomes that we've measured is the experience from the nurses themselves about where they now see that they're in really good alignment with clear communication. So I've implemented this in many organizations, such as the Hospital for Special Surgery, Greenwich Hospital, Bon Secours Health System, and many others. And I would say that in working with them over the years, some of them have done a phenomenal job of integrating it. And one of the ways that you could tell when something's working well is when you hear that the internal people that were responsible for helping get this off the ground left the organization and the momentum has not shifted.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, congratulations on that. And again, it is somebody has to plant the seed, and it always takes a team to do this, and there needs to be a driver behind that. So that congrats on that. Clearly, we can see today that the huddle has become an expectation. Now, the effectiveness of the huddle still has a lot of room for improvement. And I work with a lot of emerging leaders, right? That's really where my focus is. Although I'm comfortable in saying that most of them attend a huddle on the institutional level, they don't always find the value. They're still struggling, or have not even started on on a bedside or unit based huddle per se. So give us some insight to the listeners. How do I get started? And of course, like developing a culture is not like a light switch, right? I cannot just turn it on and turn it off. That takes time. So give us a little perspective on how to get this started, and how long would it take me to get into a rhythm that is meaningful, so I can measure the outcomes of our progress.
Yeah. So as far as getting it started, I think that the first thing I would say is kind of managing up, meaning that if you have leaders above you who empower you and support you on the methodology, because that's very important. Because what happens is this: when you start to invite others into your unit-based huddle, meaning you reach out to other departments and you engage them in this, and you go with the concept representation, which is, see, here's what happens. When we say we are doing our organizational huddle at 8:30 on Tuesday and Friday, and we have six departments identified to meet up at that, along with nursing, representatives emphasize this. They must be there on time. Walter, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself. A lot of times people get very cynical about meetings because they don't start on time, they're not well organized. In the organizational huddle, it's a very focused process. It's
Mm-hmm.
like 8:30, the ship sails. And it's about, we know, and that we're looking at each other and we're listening, we're going around and we're seeing. And by the way, sometimes when we go around, the answer is right now we don't really need anything. So people will say to me, then why'd we huddle? Here's why. Acknowledging that we're all in alignment with each other still has, it's a positive. It's a positive
Yep.
acknowledgement. And the other thing is it builds teams. But in terms of getting it started, if you could manage up, get support, other departments and their bosses to support you on the concept of be there, see each other as customers, I think you're about 75% the way there. There's other things about the structure of the champions and reporting out mechanism, but generally speaking, if you could accomplish that, and you as a emerging leader can move that needle, you're well on your way.
Yeah, I think so. That thank you for sharing that, by the way. And we have to take action, right? It starts by doing something about it. So if you are an emerging leader and you have currently no huddle in place, again, following that framework of managing up, and then at least starting something on your unit that can then develop into something more meaningful, with the focus of being clear, to being concise, at 5 to 7 to 10 minutes. But even more importantly, don't hesitate to reach out. Look online, find other experts in the field, find a unit within your own institution or your own healthcare system where this is well established, and go spend some time on the Gemba. Right? Go observe to see what it is like, and then bring that best practice back to your unit and improve upon it. Now, there's no such thing as a huddle that starts with an I, right? It is, I think you have really emphasized that. So as you start exploring as an emerging leader, instituting the framework of an institutional huddle on a unit-based level, make sure you use your teammates, right? And really that is the importance, that it is a we event, not an I event, right? It's not one person. I think that you have the opportunity, as you talked about earlier, that people can come and learn, as part of their development process, to be part of the huddle. So when one is on vacation, the huddle never stops. And that is, I think, the
Well, that's
most important message, right? Is to never not have that huddle.
it's interesting, Walter, you say that. I'm laughing because when I think about it, I mean, the metaphor, of course, comes from football. And what we know about football is that when a player goes out of the lineup, whether it's maybe, if God forbid, injury, Uh, but regardless of the reason why the player goes out of the lineup, the best teams, it doesn't matter. It becomes seamless. Model. It was based on that. In other words, it's based on the concept that since we're there to serve each other as customers in the moment, every one of us, any one of us. So if I'm the one that you assign to the huddle at 8:30 and something comes up where I can't be there, you could tap my colleague on the shoulder and it becomes seamless.
Yeah.
Unlike, think about other kinds and committees that we serve on. People will say, well, Bob Cooper can't be there, so we can't have the meeting. And it's like the entire engine stops. Not with the organizational huddle. There's no such thing. Nothing changes just because an individual's on vacation or can't be there.
Yeah, and that is speaks to building true habits and behaviors, and that's where the champion needs to come in to really stick to that for weeks and months on end until it becomes an expectation. That it's almost like missing a limb when you don't have the huddle. And you know the most dangerous thing you can do as you put a new process into place is skipping a week or two or three, because we love to go back to the way the old way of doing it, right? It is that you skip it 2 or 3 weeks, next thing it's in the past. Right? I've been there, done that, got a T-shirt. We'll try something new in a month or two from now when somebody else gets the energy to bring it up as a topic. Listen, I think this topic of culture, establishing a culture of service excellence, is something that is we can talk about often enough. Believe this is rooted even more in behavior than the technical skills. I think we have the technical skills to have these conversations, but it's the behavior of letting go, is the behavior of taking action, it's the behavior of empowering, it's the behavior of truly listening is where the skills, knowledge, and abilities really need to be built. So, a couple parting words as we start wrapping up our Monday morning chat about leadership. It really time flew by.
Well, yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And what I would say, to your audience is I wish you well with it. It's a journey worth going on because what we know and what I've learned in all the years that I've been involved in service excellence, certainly with the organizational huddle, is that when you get emerging leaders throughout an organization who embrace the concepts around serving each other as customers and doing it in a transparent, organized way, great things happen.
Yes. So, with that said, I have your book right over here. Where can people find it? Huddle Up: Creating and Sustaining a Culture of Service Excellence by Robert
I
L.
would say
Cooper.
there's two ways you could get it. One would be Amazon, and the other way would be publisher, which is Ex Libris, XLibris.com. Either way, you'd be able to purchase the book. And if you
Okay,
go on
and
my
of
website, you could get just general information that
excellent.
I people.
And of course, we can find you on LinkedIn as well. Bob, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know that we have another date in the future to host a lunch and learn, which we do every Friday at 12 o'clock for 30 minutes. In that lunch and learn, we're going to lay out a little bit more about the framework of how to set that up for your team. So we look forward to that in a date in the future. We'll be posting that. Next week, we have an exciting speaker and guest coming from by way of South Africa. Her name is Paula Quincy. She's a relationships expert, and we're going to talk a little bit about relationships and partnerships, and especially what has changed during COVID, where we went from in person to hybrid, and now to most of the people in this hybrid model of being on site and learning how to build new relationships and partnerships that lead to higher level of performance as well. Again, thank you everybody for joining today. You can find it on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and of course you can join the Dutch Mentor free membership pages via my website at thedutchmentor.com, where you can look back at all of the topics that we cover on a weekly basis. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. And we'll see everybody again next week. Same place, same time, Monday morning, 10 o'clock. Come join us for a chat about leadership with Paula Quincy.